Welcome to the deep dive. This is where we take the source material you provide. Could be articles, research notes, maybe even personal files, and we really plunge in.
Yeah, our goal is to help you pull out the most important insights, find those surprising facts, and basically make sense of it all.
Think of it as your way to get truly informed on something complex without having to wade through mountains of information yourself.
Yeah, and today we're tackling a stack of documents that are, let's just say, deeply unsettling. This isn't casual reading.
No, not at all. We're looking
Yeah.
at a collection, right? Files, notes, articles, all detailing this series of events, really disturbing events spanning almost 20 years.
And it all seems to center around this shadowy group, yes, but also something else, something ancient, something terrible that feels like it's pulling the strings across this whole hidden timeline.
You even see it written on some of the documents, almost like a title or a warning, maybe?
Mm.
God's teeth.
So our mission for this deep dive is to try and unpack this really complex, hidden history, just as it's laid out in these pages you've sent us.
We need to get a handle on the key players, who's involved over these, 2 decades?
Exactly. And the patterns, the really unsettling patterns that keep cropping up. And maybe touch on the potential implications, the kind of horrors described in these files.
It sounds like a deep dive into a timeline just filled with, I don't know, bitter choices and some truly terrible outcomes for anyone involved.
That sums it up pretty well, unfortunately.
Okay, let's get into it then. The timeline presented in these documents, it seems to kick off really sharply in 2001. There's this event, it's just referred to as Go Forth.
And according to the sources, this is the moment. This is when the agents, the people central to this whole narrative, step onto this long, dark path.
And the place it starts, the flashpoint, is this location called Cornucopia House.
Right. And looking at the early files, the surface descriptions, it's presented as a children's residential facility on a farm, seemingly normal farm, near Zion, Maryland.
You'd picture, rural setting, maybe some animals, kids.
Exactly. But the reality, when you dig into the reports, the recovered documents, it's shocking. Cornucopia House wasn't that at all. It was a front.
A front for what?
Something horrific. A codified regime, the documents say, of religious child abuse, sorcery, torture. It's awful stuff.
Wow, and the sources link this modern horror back to something ancient.
They do, explicitly.
Oh.
To the black rites of Bast, ancient Egyptian stuff, and, almost unbelievably, to the 18th century Russian Skopsy sect.
Wait, the Skopsy. The ones known for radical self-mutilation.
That's them. So you've got this bizarre, jarring mix. Ancient Egyptian rituals, an 18th century Russian castration cult, all somehow converging in rural Maryland in 2001.
The sheer strangeness of that combination, it just screams that something deeply wrong, deeply perverted is going on, connecting these disparate horrors across time and cultures.
Focused on child suffering and ritual, yeah.
So the mission, this Go Forth, how is that laid out in the material?
It's chillingly direct. And morally, well, fraught from the get-go. There's a directive. It comes from someone or something called ACEL.
ACEL.
Yeah, just ACEL. It's delivered through an operative named Agent Clove, who's identified elsewhere as Dr. Marie Noella. And the core instruction is just brutally simple. Neutralize the facility.
Neutralize. That sounds clinical.
It sounds clinical, but the details that come with it, they're specific, and they demand this terrifying level of ruthlessness. The orders are quoted. Secure unregistered firearms, mask up, and go to Cornucopia House at night. Kill every adult. Don't let the targets speak. Dispose of the bodies and evidence.
Kill every adult. Don't let them speak.
Yeah.
That's wow.
It's presented in the documents as this necessary but incredibly brutal intervention. The emphasis is all on efficiency, speed, ruthlessness, but that moral compromise, it's baked in right from the start.
And Agent Clove, the one delivering the orders.
According to the note, she was tense. Brittle, almost,
Yeah.
insisting on absolute ruthlessness. There's a quote attributed to her. Say whatever it takes, and there's always the cat folder.
The cat folder. We'll have to come back to that. There's another phrase mentioned too, right? Something about venting poison.
Yes, vent the poison before they can spit it at you. That's apparently part of Clove's dialogue in these reports.
What does that even mean? It sounds like they were afraid the targets could do something unconventional if they spoke.
It suggests that, yeah, maybe some kind of psychic attack, a curse, who knows, something beyond normal resistance. It implies ACEL, or Clove herself, maybe had prior experience with this kind of thing, and that fear overrode everything else. No time for questions, just act. It's a really grim picture of necessary evil these files paint.
Okay, so the operation happens. What did they find there? What does the evidence described in the sources tell us about Cornucopia House?
This is where it gets undeniably, profoundly unsettling. First off, that cartoon cat folder Clove mentioned.
Yeah, the cat folder.
The physical description is just bad. Pink cover, it says, sticky, with what looks like blood and some kind of black oily stuff, and it smells strongly of gasoline.
Just holding it sounds like a hazard. What's inside?
Far worse than the outside. It wasn't just intel, not just documents. It contained this bizarre biological slurry. Slurry.
Like, the reports describe it as a mix of cancerous marrow cells, corrupted red blood cells, misshapen semen, and tumorous muscle cells. Human cells, all messed up, cancerous, mixed together in ways that make no biological sense.
That's fundamentally wrong. Why would those things even be together?
Exactly. The sources explicitly state there's no reason for these human cell types to be combined like this, let alone why they're all cancerous. It's just unnatural.
Is that all?
It gets worse. Closer study, according to the investigation notes, revealed dead and cancerous animal cells mixed in there too.
Human and animal cancer cells mixed together in some black goo.
Right. And the sources make a specific point. Just studying this genetic slurry, trying to understand it, costs the investigator SM. That's the term they use for mental stability.
Just simply looking at this stuff, comprehending it, is enough to damage your mind.
That's the implication. It's so horrific, so alien, that it actively harms your ability to process reality. This stew material isn't just evidence. It's like weaponized wrongness.
Okay, wow. What about the place itself, the buildings? Moving beyond the folder, the barn is described. Inside, animal cages. Animals that are malnourished, dead, dying.
Oh, that's awful.
And here's a really grim detail the sources highlight. Name tags found on some of these cages. They matched the names of children listed in adoption records from an organization called Families Without Frontiers.
Wait, the tags matched the kids' names, so the animals were...
The implication is gut-wrenching. Maybe they were the children's actual pets brought with them and then abused. Or maybe, even worse, they were symbolic representations of the children themselves suffering the same neglect and torture.
That's horrific.
Yeah. And the sources also mention empty guard dog kennels, another unsettling detail, where the dogs removed, incapacitated somehow before the operation. It adds to the mystery.
What about the main house? The cottage?
The main house, yeah, sometimes called the cottage in the reports. It presents this really disturbing contrast. Some bedrooms had standard decor, beds, dressers, normal-ish. But mixed in with that, they found condoms, pornographic magazines, camera equipment, and piles of toys confiscated from the children. It's like this twisted mockery of a home.
And wasn't there something about a punishment box?
Yes, a punishment box. Filled with toys, but they'd been modified, given bloody teeth and claws. A grotesque physical representation of the abuse. The sources also mention adult-sized animal masks, smelling of sweat. Suggests rituals, maybe? The tormentors wearing them?
It just gets worse and worse. What else?
The boys' dormitory section is described as eerie, like no one actually lived there. Unused beds, dusty sports gear. It reinforces that the whole children's home thing was a thin facade, not even fully maintained everywhere.
But there was one room, the sun porch. That sounded particularly bad in the summary.
The sun porch, right. That's where the reports indicate the supernatural horror was maybe most visible, at least at first. It's described as initially looking obscured, like frost or heavy condensation on the glass, hiding whatever was inside, even though heaters were supposedly on.
Like an enchantment.
Seems like it.
Yeah.
Because when that was broken, maybe accidentally during the raid, maybe deliberately, the sources say the horrifying reality was revealed. A stench like a slaughterhouse. Stained furniture. And the occupant described as an ancient hag wearing nothing but a filthy bathrobe.
Just seeing that broke the illusion.
Apparently. The sources explicitly state that witnessing this illusion collapse, seeing the horror behind the quaint cottage facade, cost the agents sand points, a direct assault on their grasp of reality.
And the guest bedroom. I remember that mentioned.
Yeah, the guest bedroom, clarified in the reports, definitely not for guests. It was a padded, soundproof cell. The only things inside were a tray holding implements of torture.
Okay, no doubt left about what was happening there.
None whatsoever. These documents do not shy away from the absolute depravity.
Who are the adults running this place? The sources must name them.
They do. The key adults, the main tormentors. There is Yelena Kalamatiano, known as Babushka, described as the founder of Families Without Frontiers, the adoption agency linked to the kids, and a skilled sorcerer.
A sorcerer.
That's what the documents claim. Says she developed a ritual called Estrus of the Mother, which transformed her, enhanced her power. apparently got bitter after the Skopje elders denied her immortality, turned against them.
So she was Skopje originally.
Seems implied, or at least connected. Then there's UNCAiNNY, portrayed as someone initially forced into it, but who quickly became an acculturated sadist. Stayed loyal to Babushka because she was the top predator, basically. He couldn't escape her.
Anyone else?
Sabina Apollonov, described as Yelena's most loyal follower. Tragically, a former victim of abuse herself who became a tormentor, actively abused the kids, fully bought into worshipping. Shub-Niggurath, another entity mentioned, seemingly called from the nearby woods.
Shub-Niggurath. Okay, another name to track. And UNCAiNNY.
Also mentioned, initially got satisfaction from the abuse, but the notes say he kind of lost his enthusiasm. Maybe having to share victims, perform on command, took the fun out of it for him. It's a chillingly detached observation in the files.
And the Skopje connection, it wasn't just historical.
No, the sources mention some of the people involved, men and women, bore terrible scars, consistent with Skopje ritual mutilation. It suggests this ancient, disturbing practice was still physically present, linking directly to these modern horrors, an unbroken line of specific depravity.
God. And the children, what did the sources say about them?
It's heartbreaking, described as eerily silent, conditioned by extreme abuse. They apparently cowered uncontrollably if addressed, couldn't speak or make noise without showing extreme fear.
Just completely broken.
Seems that way. Specific kids are mentioned briefly, little flashes of individual tragedy. Like Conradin, the boy noted for being attached to a ferret. That detail, Conradin and the ferret, becomes really significant later on.
And the initial mission orders, they implied the agents might have had to kill the children.
That chilling possibility was definitely there in the instructions, yes. But the sources strongly suggest it was avoided. Not out of mercy, necessarily,
But
because of the sheer scale of the investigation it would trigger. Killing a few adults, you might explain that away. Fire, maybe they fled, maybe infighting, things that might not make national news. But murdering dozens of orphans, that's a massive federal case, impossible to contain.
So pragmatism over morality, even in that horrific choice.
That's the implication. So go forth, as detailed here, was this brutal, messy cleanup. Necessary, maybe, according to ACell, but it kicked off this whole thing, left bodies to dispose of, and started a complex cover-up just to hide the agent's involvement and the mission's true source.
A horrific starting point.
Oh.
Which leads into what the documents call the long years, right?
Yeah.
Roughly 2001 to 2016.
Exactly. This is the period, according to these files, where the agents involved get formally recruited into the new Delta Green structure. They call it the official program.
So they become part of a sanctioned, maybe government-backed organization.
Seems like it. And these years are filled with other missions. The sources hint strongly that the focus was heavily on the post-9/11 war on terror, global stuff.
The cornucopia house, it just fades.
Fades into the background, maybe. The trauma is still there, the documents suggest, but day-to-day program work takes priority. They explicitly state the horror wasn't forgotten, just sidelined. Active pursuit of Agent Clove or whatever entities were involved at Cornucopia, that gets pushed aside by other operational directives.
But the cosmic horror element that Cornucopia introduced, that doesn't go away.
No, it persists. And it becomes clearer in the documents from this later period. The sources start describing Bast not just as an ancient Egyptian myth, but as this active cosmic force interacting with reality in terrifying ways.
How so? What characteristics do they describe?
It's unsettling, almost pseudoscientific. They talk about cosmic patience. Like Bast's manipulations started before Earth even formed. It operates on timescales we can't even imagine. It can vanish from an agent's life for years, the files say, kind of cruelly letting them think they're safe before reappearing.
That's disturbing. What else?
The predatory motif. This is how Bast's fundamental nature, its hunger, supposedly manifests to our limited senses. Through images, instances of raw animal savagery, its hunger for the unnatural, for suffering, it apparently inscribes this theme of brutal predation onto reality itself.
So it's not just symbolism, it's influence.
That's how it's presented. Then there's scent, described as the secret sanity test for people marked by Bast the Teeth. If they pass, they can somehow recognize people or places touched by the unnatural. The scenario notes even suggest the handler, the person running this narrative, should decide if and when this happens to an agent without explaining it, keeping them on edge.
A creepy new sense they don't understand. How does Bast communicate?
Through call, not language. It uses, according to the sources, inscrutable symbolic images, maybe clips from nature documentaries, silent, random patterns. The files even suggest it can manipulate subatomic particles to directly affect an agent's brain, causing disturbing dreams, visions.
And understanding these calls.
Costs you sand.
Yeah.
Just grasping a sliver of its alien intent damages your mind.
Is there anything else? Hunt.
Hunt, yeah. Supposedly happens only once per agent. When they're near death, low hit points, they might suddenly get this burst of superhuman endurance. Push through impossible pain.
Like a boon.
The sources frame it as suffering Bast's unwanted attention. It doesn't stop you from dying necessarily, but it's this horrifying sign of the entity's direct interest in your struggle.
Wow. And the documents try to link this to the actual science.
Yeah.
Physics.
They do, which is chilling. They mention a theoretical Bast particle. And this truly disturbing idea. You know how science talks about dark energy making up like 68% of the universe?
Yeah, the stuff driving expansion.
What if these sources hypothesize that vast unseen energy isn't just some constant? What if it's Bast's appetite? The literal hunger of a cosmic predator making up most of reality's energy budget.
That's a terrifying thought. The universe is its hunger.
The sources suggest it might be more accurate to say the universe is part of Bast, not the other way around. They even hint the Bast particle's manifestation correlates with rising entropy as things fall apart. Bast becomes more present. It pushes cosmology into cosmic horror.
And the ancient context gets fleshed out more too.
Yeah, the Black Rites of Bast. Started in southern Egypt pre-3000 BC, this codified regime of child abuse, sorcery, torture, specifically on orphans, to call the entity. In return, Bast sent warriors her teeth to avenge the pain.
But didn't someone try to stop it?
Neferenka, the Black Pharaoh, sources say he purged the Bast sects, changed historical records, forced the cult north. This apparently led to Bast's public image changing later from lion goddess to domestic cat goddess, while the hidden, perverted rites continued in secret.
Which brings us back to the idea of Bast marking people. Her teeth.
Exactly. The sources get very direct here. They say, your agent in this scenario might be marked as one of Bast's teeth. They even give the old Egyptian term, nachahat, meaning tooth, explicitly linking modern agents to this ancient, horrifying concept.
How does this marking happen?
Through physical harm from strange animal encounters, called chipping encounters in the documents. It's always an animal or its remains a bite, a bone splinter from a carcass, a rabid bat, a weirdly friendly dog that nips you, even just rats or wasps suddenly nesting in your car.
And the more you try to avoid animals,
the weirder and more unavoidable the chipping becomes, according to the files. Each incident costs a san. It's this physical, recurring sign of Bast's unwanted attention.
Are other entities mentioned besides Bast? You said Shub-Niggurath earlier.
Briefly, yeah. Shub-Niggurath, the black goat of the woods, and its spawn, the Haiti Nigritia. Yelena's experiments at Cornucopia were apparently trying to recontact the spawn. Sabina was a worshipper, and that witch oil ritual encountered later is also linked to Shub-Niggurath or its influence.
So these long years, they weren't quiet at all, were they?
Not underneath. According to these documents, it was a time the cosmic threat was quietly working, marking people, being maybe unknowingly pursued by the agents under the program banner, even as the original Cornucopia horror was supposedly buried.
A buried secret that doesn't stay buried. Which brings us to 2016 and Red Thoughts.
Yep, the past comes roaring back. The repercussions go forth from that initial brutal cleanup. They surface again very publicly. The trigger. A mass grave is discovered at the old Cornucopia house site.
Oh, God, so it gets official attention.
Big time. An official investigation kicks off, led by Maryland State Police Detective Sergeant Almudena Velasquez. And the documents note, significantly, she was involved in the original, brief, failed investigation back in 2001. The one that found nothing.
So she has a history with this place.
She does. Now she's working with a Cecil County deputy, Michael Costa. And of course, the media descends. Specifically, a reporter named Olivia Central-Toomey from the Baltimore Sun, described as really hungry for a story, pushing boundaries, even using a drone to get pictures of the dig site.
How does Delta Green, the program, react to this?
Their response is codenamed Masticate. An assistant U.S. attorney, Anthony Pizzarelli, tasks the agents directly, control the situation, prevent program exposure, manage the narrative, push it all back down.
Control the narrative. What are Pizzarelli's priorities?
The documents make them chillingly clear. Number 1, reduce public awareness of the unnatural horrors found there. Number 2, a distant second. Protect one specific agent he used to be close to. Protecting the rest of the team. Way down the list. He wants the problem contained, basically no matter the cost to the agents on the ground.
So what do they find at the site this time? The investigation reports must be detailed.
They are grimly detailed. The sheer number of bodies being unearthed, evidence markers everywhere, the slow, painstaking excavation, its overwhelming horror.
And the condition of the remains.
Terrible. The bones themselves tell stories. Clear evidence, the reports say, of malnutrition and starvation, throttling, blunt trauma, stabbing, shooting, sexual violation, just every kind of cruelty imaginable recorded in the bones.
And that stew material, does that show up again?
It does, found in the graves. Its connection to the black ichor from the cat folder back in 2001 is noted, still described as having this unnatural taint, something fundamentally wrong.
So they need to explain that away too.
Desperately. The sources mention the need to contain it, explain it as something mundane, maybe sewage from a bad septic tank, illegally dumped oil, anything that what it is. They even mention a specific grad student, Owen Becker, who was leaking details about this weird fluid to the reporter Olivia Toomey, making the cover-up much harder.
This is a nightmare. Then there's the death of Carrie Houghton. Who was she?
A social worker, formerly connected to Cornucopia House. The sources identify her handwriting on official reports going back to 1998, so she had a long, disturbing history with the place.
And her death was suspicious.
Incredibly strange, puncture marks on her body, and bizarrely, her body was found stored at a corrections unit. A prison.
Stored at a prison. How? And the forensics.
The forensic anomalies described are really disturbing, pointing straight to the unnatural. First, her body was undiscovered for 17 hours in the Maryland August heat, but there was zero insect damage. Scientifically impossible, the reports note.
No insects. Okay, that's weird.
Weirder still, microscopic examination of her brain showed widespread glial scarring, similar to CTE, the kind athletes get from repeated head trauma.
But was she beaten?
The reports suggest it wasn't just physical trauma. It could be from severe past trauma or, chillingly, from exposure to something so fundamentally unnatural it mimics brain injury. They note the same damage in Franklin Price, her predecessor, who visited Cornucopia years earlier and encountered Elena's sorcery. It's like the horror leaves physical, unnatural scars on the brain.
What about the abduction itself? Was there footage?
Yes, security camera footage, described in painstaking, unnerving detail. 3 attackers, 2 men, 1 woman. Their movements are perfectly synchronized. They converge from 3 different directions in perfect unison, the report says. Yet no visible communication gear.
Coordinated without communicating.
Seems like it. The woman is seen doing what the documents call dental work on Houghton, using tools later identified as belonging to a prison maintenance worker, Kim Sunhu, who has a rock-solid alibi.
So the tools were stolen, used, and maybe returned.
Implied. And the camera framing is odd, like they wanted to be seen in this specific, disturbing way. There's also this bizarre detail about a dog appearing at exactly 7:23 a.m. every morning on the footage, just 1 frame on the motion-activated camera, then gone.
A ghost dog.
Well, the investigation followed the dog trail, found it led to a culvert and then woods nearby. Woods noted as being completely empty of animal life. Another dead zone.
Creepy. Did the murder weapons offer any clues?
Mundane tools, but they had this strange etching. Bring only death. The sources connect this, potentially, to weapons sourced from specific shady places mentioned earlier, like a dealer Leon Chapman or a certain pawn shop. Suggests a pattern, a signature may be tied to the killers.
With all this surfacing, how does the program plan the cover-up?
Several options are detailed. Blaming dead detectives from the original failed 2001 investigation, sacrificing Detective Velasquez's career, maybe framing her for incompetence back then.
That's brutal.
Or blaming a missing FBI agent, Gary Hall. He was Agent Clo's former associate, disappeared back in 2001. His death was controversially ruled a suicide, but there's mention of a missing addendum file. They could spin it that the current agents were just Hall's unwitting associates, picking up his cold case.
But blaming the FBI, that sounds risky.
Very risky. Highlighted in the documents, it would sour relations, potentially expose other secrets. And alongside these plans, there's the actual destruction of evidence. An operation codenamed Shredding Futures at the Fallon Federal Building, specifically to eliminate the last paper trails connecting the agents to go forth in 2001.
So Red Thoughts is basically the past exploding into the present, forcing a desperate cover-up while simultaneously revealing these really bizarre, inhuman elements are still active.
Exactly. The strange stew, the impossible forensics, the coordinated, almost animalistic killers leaving weird calling cards. It's all escalating.
Which leads us directly into the next phase in the documents, White Teeth, also around 2016.
Right. And the core idea here is terrifying. The survivors from Cornucopia House, they've grown up.
The children who were rescued.
Yes. but marked, not just by the horrific trauma, but potentially by Bast itself. And according to these sources, some of them have become willing predators.
Willing predators.
They're presented as the new living teeth of Bast, active agents of this cosmic force in the world.
How many? All of them.
No, the documents note most survivors really struggled. Neglect in foster care, severe language disabilities. There are notes from someone named Nika Chilikov mentioning this. Survivors resistant to speaking, some sent to refuges where other weird Bast-related stuff happened, like with Samuel Ball and a bear attack. But a few survivors were different. Exceptions.
Exceptions how?
These individuals apparently retain a connection to the force beyond all things, as the sources put it. They can read its signs, follow synchronicity, flow through probability in ways that seem effortless, guided by their god.
Okay, that's deeply unsettling.
Right.
Are there the exceptions? Are they named?
Key individuals are identified. El Gable, called the Quiet Child. Thomas Perez, a silent slave. Philly Phil, also a slave of silence. And significantly, Connor Hearn, explicitly linking back to the boy with the ferret from Cornucopia House.
Conrad, and he's one of them. So the agents have to hunt these survivors down.
That's the next phase of the investigation detailed here. Following these disturbing threads, first, it leads them to Florida, the Florida connection, and the death of a woman named Crystal Killian. Crystal Killian. Wait, didn't you say Agent Clove's real name was Dr. Marie Noella?
Bingo! Photos, database checks. Crystal Killian is Agent Clove. Dr. Marie Noella, the operative who gave the go-forth orders back in 2001.
So Clove faked her death, or disappeared. What was she doing?
The documents sketch out her life after 2001, re-entered the U.S. under a false identity, worked as a librarian, but her real work, intense research, genealogy, criminology, the occult.
She was hunting them too. Seems like it. Her journal entries, found later, detail her own desperate hunt for the forces that ruined her life, twisted her. She mentions her old Delta Green cell, C cell, and a chaotic fire at a taxi garage where she fled with a folder, maybe the original cartoon cat folder. Suggests she'd been trying to understand or fight this thing on her own.
But she ends up dead. How?
Her death scene? Animalistic damage to her office, her books torn apart, and even weirder, the animal anomalies in the trailer park where she lived.
What kind of anomalies?
A chilling silence. All of the dogs in the park just stopped barking. Pets went missing en masse. And then the dead pets started turning up near her trailer. Horrible internal damage, burst stomachs, drowned in shallow puddles but found on dry land. And the reports explicitly say flies avoided the bodies.
Flies avoided them. That's
Deeply unnatural. The documents connect this animalistic signature, this perversion of life, directly back to Bast's predatory motif and the nature of its teeth.
Any other clues there?
Strange graffiti on her trailer door. A black paint outline of a head in profile with a splotch of red spray in the shape of a brain. And this bizarre synchronicity called the writer at Myers Point, a skinny guy on a motorcycle, face hidden, just watching the agents from afar. These are the signs, the trails left by the teeth.
Where does the trail lead next?
To Miami, the Miami connection. Specifically, St. Lawrence Church, described as a struggling church with a homeless shelter.
And what's significant about this place?
The sources document the unique, disturbing oral traditions of the homeless residents there. It's fascinating. It's not just random folklore. It forms this whole cosmology that directly mirrors and interprets the cosmic horror that agents are facing.
A cosmology? Like what?
It centers on the hungry mother. In this view, heaven and earth are just a farm, and humans, where las vacas, the cows, raised as food. Reality itself is a lie, a deception to keep the cattle docile while the hungry mother feeds on our misery. Everything exists just to feed her.
That's bleak. Does it mention anything else relevant?
It talks about red-minded men who serve her willingly, and quiet children and silent slaves who oppose her. They refuse to speak because speech is part of the lie, the system. They try to wake people up. There's also a mention of a blue lady, guardian angel legend, maybe a glimmer of hope or another entity. It's this terrifying interpretation of reality, suggesting this awareness has persisted outside mainstream society.
And young predators, the teeth, they're connected to this church.
Not the church itself, but the empty house across the street, described as derelict, boarded up, used as a hideout, trash, needles, red spray paint graffiti inside. And that same striking detail noted again. No animals near it. Even a stray dog approaches, sniffs, whines, and runs away. That unnatural absence is a constant marker.
What happens inside the empty house?
An encounter. Repeated symbols on the walls, later deciphered as astronomical or landmark codes, like markers left by the predators, and this unsettling voice, whispering. Harsh, clipped diction, like someone who rarely speaks. It calls the agents outside, links the hunger to Shredny Vashtar, remember that name, and talks about taking babies from heaven. Deeply unnatural.
And they confront some of the teeth here.
Yes. Elle Gable, the quiet child, and Philly Phil. Gable's described rough tattoo, unsettling smile. She uses a ritual witch oil.
Witch oil. Made from what?
The sources say it's made from that same unnatural stew material, maybe from Phil's blood or tissue. And it causes these powerful, damaging hallucinations in the agents.
Hallucinations like what?
It transports them into a false memory specifically, a terrifyingly real hallucination of being back in Babushka's cottage at Cornucopia House. It feels real, causes physical sensations like intense hunger and thirst within the illusion, and major sand loss when they snap out and realize the damage it did. It's a psychological weapon derived from the original horror.
What about Philly Phil?
He's found in a pit, foul water, animal bones. He's been mauled, blinded, but he's still functional. His connection to the stew is explicit. His blood or tissue is likely the source for the witch oil. And bizarrely, he offers to teach the agents rituals like that good smoke and witch oil.
He offers to teach them. That's messed up. What happens to him?
The sources note that turning him over to the program actually costs the agent sand points because of the suspicion the program will just prolong his corrupted misery for a few hours trying to study him.
Grim choices all around. Where does the investigation go after Miami?
The Everglades. The Everglades connection. The graffiti symbols potentially lead them there. Swampy environment, animal sounds everywhere, unlike the dead zones. Here they encounter Thomas Perez, another silent slave.
He doesn't speak either.
Communicates via American Sign Language, ASL, the sources note, refuses to speak aloud. He signs about his real family in the swamp and warns that angels coming.
Angels, what does that mean?
It means horror, because then these chimeras emerge. Not just mutated animals, described explicitly as horrid creations of Bast, unnatural creatures. And unlike animals influenced by Gable or others, the agents have no power over these. They hunt relentlessly even after Perez dies. They seem like direct, autonomous agents of Bast itself.
So White Teeth shows the survivors becoming these active, dangerous agents, using powers derived from the original horror, still marked by Bast's predatory nature.
Exactly. They've evolved into something new and terrifying.
Which brings us to the final, most recent phase in these documents, the hidden god, around 2020. This focuses on Conradin.
Yes. The investigation finally tracks down Conradin, the boy with the ferret. The documents reveal his full identity, Esau Tillman, formerly Jacob Tillman. His history after Cornucopia is noted as difficult, recovered by his father, Eli Tillman, but legal battles, bureaucratic failures. His recovery was short-circuited.
And where is Esau Tillman now? This must be the big reveal.
It is perhaps the most shocking part of this entire timeline. According to these sources, Esau Tillman is currently an ICE agent, enforcement and removal operations, working at a detention facility near El Paso, Texas.
An ICE agent. Conradin is an ICE agent.
Yes. The facility itself has a cover name, the Frank Harvey Water Reclamation Plant, but it functions as an ICE detention center.
What's the setup there?
It's described as deliberately opaque. Layers of ownership contracts El Paso Water, ICE, a private company called OYF Force. This tangled web creates plausible deniability, makes oversight incredibly difficult. It holds adult men temporarily and, crucially, young boys.
Young boys. And Tillman works there.
He does. And there's a hidden section called the private side, or sometimes chillingly, the surplus, accessible only by specific magnetic key cards, not meant for public knowledge, not meant for oversight.
Hidden within a government facility.
Technically, the sources note it should be open to inspection because of the ICE contract, but it hasn't happened. This structure designed for detention has this hidden layer operating completely outside accountability.
What are the conditions like in this? Private side.
Horrifying, meticulously cruel as described. Cramped cages, no quarantine, so illness is rampant. Severe malnutrition, sleep deprivation, traumatic shock among the detainees.
My God. Are there witnesses?
A nurse's observations are included. Hung Lan Fan. She notes her frustration she can't see the kids on the private side. Tillman administers tests himself. His explanation for giving antibiotics is chillingly detached. Only, like, factory farm animals. The goal isn't health. It's prolonging pain.
Prolonging pain?
That's the assessment. There's a specific, deeply disturbing account of an infant girl, severe malnutrition and basic injury, ringworm, and Tillman's cold clinical reaction to her suffering. The system itself is weaponized for cruelty here.
And what is Tillman doing there besides overseeing this?
His activities are described. beating on the cages, listening to music on headphones while the detainees suffer. His journal entries, recovered somehow, give this horrifying insight into his mind.
What do they say?
He explicitly links his experiences, his actions, to the hunger in the universe. He sees history as a blood trail of suffering for his God. He identifies himself as one of Bast's teeth, actively working to perpetuate the cycle, says he's awakening others to this reality. And he refers to Sredni Vashtar as his first name for his God.
Sredni Vashtar. That name from The Voice in Miami. It was Conradin.
It confirms it. He's fully embraced this role.
Is he working alone, or are others complicit?
Others are complicit. Kendall Duncan, an ICE SRT agent, is described as protecting the operation, has a past connection to Tillman through a traumatic camp experience called God Runners, and Chasen Lafferty, the CEO of LYF Force, the private company running the private side, also connected to Tillman via that same camp trauma.
Trauma bonding.
Seems like it. Lafferty's portrayed as seeing Tillman as a guardian angel, deeply complicit even though he knows something's wrong. He's described as being familiar with pain as a motivator. It's this nexus of past trauma and present corruption enabling cosmic horror inside a government facility.
So the agents find this out. What can they even do? What are their options, according to these documents?
It's a grim dilemma. Option 1. Brief Pizzarelli and the program. But the documents make the likely outcome clear. The program sees the agents themselves as a huge risk now. Linked to Bast, potentially expose secrets, let the cultist escape go forth, their liabilities.
So Pizzarelli's offer to debrief them.
Is almost certainly a trap, a plan to remove the agents off the board, frame them for crimes, maybe the jailbreak if they try to free the kids. Telling Pizzarelli likely makes the agents fugitives, hunted by their own organization.
What's the alternative?
Go rogue. Operate completely outside the program. The possibility of contacting the outlaws, remnants of the old independent Delta Green for resources is mentioned. But the sources warn they won't take orders. They might just take over the mission, with totally unpredictable results.
So the final confrontation is confronting Tillman at the El Paso facility.
That's the decision highlighted. Confront Esau Tillman there, despite the insane risks. The danger from Tillman, the corrupted staff, the security, plus the huge risk of exposing these hidden government atrocities and the cosmic horror. And knowing they'll likely become enemies of the program they served.
This phase just shows how deep the rod goes, using government structures, bureaucracy, detention systems as shields, even tools for this horror, preying on the most vulnerable on a mass scale.
Exactly. It's horror embedded in the very fabric of the mundane, the official.
And the documents suggest it doesn't end there, even if they deal with Tillman.
No, the picture painted is relentless. Even if Tillman is stopped, Bast's influence, that predatory motif, it continues, it manifests. The sources give these chilling examples of recurring synchronicities that just keep happening. Regardless of the agent's actions, there's mention of the rabbit associated with weird, disturbing animal pregnancies, the bat linked to sudden unnatural mass insect deaths, swarms just dropping dead.
That's bizarre.
Glitching TVs showing weird, looped messages, one specific example. Seeing "You Are Our Heroes" glitch onto a Fox News feed, and even that bizarre 30 to 50 feral hogs meme from 2019, linked in these notes to unnaturally behaving animals that baffled authorities.
So these aren't random.
The sources frame them as Bast's persistent attention, a reminder that its influence is woven into reality, manifesting quietly in the background no matter what the agents do. The spiral continues, the horror adapts, finds new forms.
So let's try and summarize the path this deep dive has taken us on, based on these documents. We started with this awful discovery, Cornucopia House in Maryland, 2001. Ancient rites, weird sects.
Then through the long years, navigating the official program, dealing with the war on terror while simultaneously being subtly marked and influenced by this cosmic entity, Bast.
Until the past explodes back into view with the mass grave discovery in 2016, forcing a cover-up while revealing the horror is still active, evolved even.
Leading to the hunt for the white teeth, the traumatized survivors turned predators operating across the country.
And culminating in this confrontation with Conrad and Esau Tillman, embedded deep within a government detention facility near the border in 2020, running his own horror show.
It's a terrifying trajectory. These documents paint this picture of hidden realities and the absolutely immense soul-crushing cost of uncovering them, of trying to fight back.
It really forces you, the listener, to question what might be lurking beneath the surface of everyday life, and maybe even beneath the institutions we assume are there for protection.
And the moral toll. The compromises needed just to fight this stuff, like go forth, like the cover-ups. They risk turning the agents into something disturbingly similar to the horrors they oppose, marked by the same forces operating in the shadows.
I think one of the most chilling insights from these sources is how systemic abuse, government structures, bureaucracy, private contracts, detention centers, how they can become shields for these forces.
Or worse, active tools, providing the cover, the victims, the plausible deniability needed for the horror to operate on a mass scale, almost industrially, hidden in plain sight.
So if we take these sources, this narrative, at face value, if this is the reality they're describing, what does it ultimately mean?
What does it mean if that Miami cosmology is even partly right? That heaven and earth are merely a farm for the hungry mother, and reality is a lie used to keep the cattle docile while the hungry mother consumes their misery?
It leaves you, well, it leaves us contemplating this terrifying possibility, doesn't it? That the universe itself might be structured for some unseen, horrifying purpose that involves our suffering.
As the author's note tucked away in the source material says, very simply, I hope such a God isn't real.